Well, we're into the Christmas week now, and I don't know whether it's beginning to feel a lot like Christmas for anybody at all. For me, it's a very different Christmas to any of the ones that I knew when I was a child. And I do feel very sorry, in fact, for all of the children who are alive now, because I don't think that there could possibly be any magic, any spirit of Christmas, any wonderment in their eyes, or any much love in their hearts. Because I wonder, has it all been removed and supplanted with fear and mistrust, and whatever kindness there might have been towards each other? Maybe what has been encouraged not only in the children who are aged, let's say, under the age of 12 or 10 anyway, these days, children who maybe even grew up in the last decade, and perhaps even children in the late 90s might have already been of that sort of participation trophy, where on the surface they tell everybody, oh, we've got to include everybody and be kind and be considerate of everybody. I think what has been encouraged in everybody's hearts is a selfishness and a sort of a determination to get whatever they can, take whatever they can, put greedy arms around things, fence things off, rather than have been encouraged to share whatever they have willingly and gladly and with a warm heart for each other. I'd like to believe, I hope, it's not that I'd like to believe, I'd like to still have hope that some of that is still alive in some people, children of all ages. Because unfortunately, what you realize when you grow to be an adult, in years at least anyway, you realize that, to your horror really, that nobody ever grows out of their childhood. They just become adults who pretend, to greater or lesser extents, as we see these days, to be mature or kind or considerate. There's very little of that even on the surface anymore these days in what we still call our society. Okay, on to the subject matter, which I want to say is like a bit of a Christmas message. And in some ways it's a recap on some of the themes that I have mentioned, at least in some of my videos throughout this year, I think. And three that I can think of is the one about Faust. This is the character Faust in the book by Johann Wolfgang van Goethe. And his character Faust, he does a deal with the devil so that he will know everything in the world, and he's able to study everything. Maybe it's like a download in the Matrix, where as soon as he wants to know all about physiology, he knows all about it. All about geography, he knows all about that. Don't know much about a science book. Well, he does. He knows all about science, and he knows all about history, and he knows all about maybe all the secret occult things that you might learn if you join all the secret societies. He knows everything towards every degree. He knows all there is to know that man can know. And then at the end of it, he sort of says, well, what good did that do me anyway? How far along did it really get me with regard to anything? Now, maybe that's, the exterior journey he went on, and it just made him realize, I know nothing about myself. Who am I now, this supposedly learned individual? And what has he lost as well along the way? Because I have a feeling that there was a love interest. I don't know if she was called Maria, but let's suppose that she was. And I'm thinking also of, Scrooge. Maybe his love interest was called Maria. And maybe things like that. Not just romances, and not just affairs of the heart in that sense, but our connections that are not just cerebral between people, we might neglect, and then one day we look back and we wonder what happened. It's always a gradual process. But I've identified something in myself. I wouldn't be able to recognize it in others if I didn't see it in myself. When we talk about books like this, and I said it at the time, I think I did, but it bears repeating as well. I could understand that it might seem like, oh, isn't it impressive that I might even know about this book, or be able to say something about it other than just that the Faustian deal is this kind of devil deal, you know. And I didn't want to give off the impression that I'm learned or educated, you know. I'm slightly educated, but I'm only sort of getting to grips every day as each day goes by with how little I know. And I don't mean that as a humble brag, you know. So there was another video anyway that I put out there, and it was about because I don't want it to seem like I'm quoting these great men, but another video anyway by this fellow was called Zen and the Art. The video was about Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I called it Zen and the Art of Noticing the Obvious. And it was by a man called Robert M. Persig. And his book is wonderful. Read it if you get a chance. And it's not difficult to read at all. Anyway, one of the ideas in it that he expressed was again about, the idea of what do we know, what is knowledge, and how far can we get with it, and how far can it take us. And the answer isn't so clear-cut, and it's a little bit unsatisfying. And he says that it's a bit like the answer to, what is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything, and what do you learn on top of a mountain with your legs crossed as a Buddhist monk, just staying silent for years? Well, maybe not much. Maybe you learn that all the tourists coming up to visit you who think they're going to learn enlightenment or ask you a question and learn the answer to it all, that you learn to just sort of laugh at these people who think that enlightenment is a commodity, or that there's a moment where you become enlightened, If there ever would be, it would be a time when you'd look back and you'd say, boy, I was just very lacking in knowledge, and not just facts and figures and knowledge empirical about the world, or even spiritual about the world, or that kind of thing, but knowledge of oneself. So maybe just the best enlightenment any of us could get is understanding that we'll never know. And that's what Robert M. Persig talked about when he referred to just as stuckness, the idea of stuckness, or the acceptance of stuckness, so that a kind of inner peace might be this acceptance of stuckness, the acceptance that we'll never know. And even if we'd somehow discover it all, we couldn't contain it all in these imperfect minds that we have. We couldn't look at it all at the same time. It would be like trying to look at, the view of everything in the world from a certain vantage point where you could see it all, but you wouldn't be able to encapsulate it all. Even if your eyes could focus on it all at the same time, you couldn't cognitively encapsulate it as all these different concepts and realize them and think them all and see them all and interrelate them all at the same time. There comes a point where you have to accept that it's got nothing to do with IQ even. It's just, it doesn't seem to be something that could be possible, because how could it be possible to realize the oneness of everything all at once? It's too much of a task, and it would be like maybe a tightrope walk along the Niagara Falls. You could walk across that tightrope, but you couldn't necessarily just stay perfectly balanced on it forever. So that realizations might come in fleeting nanoseconds and then depart as soon as they arrived. You'd grasp onto them and they'd flitter away, like moon dust or a will-o'-the-wisp, or dew on a sunny morning. And then another fellow who put it in a similar way was Richard Feynman. And, he said it in slightly more scientific terms, but he was the scientist with the heart of a poet. And he said that there's no such thing as knowing something with absolute certainty, any empirical scientific fact even, and that there's only degrees of probability as far as things go. So if anybody ever says any different, it's a bad argument. It's one of the logical fallacies that are just known by all real scientists to be the classic fallacy. It's the argument to authority, where you sort of say, well, this person said this. he does happen to be right, but the reason why I would say that it rings true is because it's a humble thing to say. And I suppose that gets to a crux of something as well, right? We have to be humble enough to know that no matter what we think we know, we have to be very careful about being prideful or boastful about, certainly not boastful, and even to ourselves, feeling pride about what we think we know and how clever we think we are. We always have to keep ourselves acutely aware that the more we learn and the more we realize how we were ignorant in the past, the more that's a trend that's likely to continue. So we should never say, I'm knowledgeable or enlightened now, and think that we can then start lecturing others. And that's not what this is intended to be. So I don't want it to sound like I'm preaching at you. And so far, I don't think that I'm necessarily sounding that way, but I hope that I amn't. It is sort of a Christmas sermon, although I'm not a priest, of course, But I kind of want it to be in the spirit of, a little thought about a subject matter as it's coming up to Christmas. And here's maybe the more central point that I wanted to get to, having said what I said, which I think is necessary to lead me into this, because we do need to make sure that if it could ever happen, that, we might just fix the problem that we have. You have to, and I'll refer back to another video that I made, you have to think about what you do after the war is over. Even the American army talked about winning the peace. I think that was a concept that was mentioned by some military person. It might, even the president at the time, I won't even say his name, might have talked about that in the Middle East. But anyway, winning the peace, right? Hearts and minds, well, that's a Vietnam phrase, isn't it? But these people, they're capable of telling the truth, right? Even though they don't necessarily have good intentions. Okay. Here's what I want to say now. I'll say this and just state it as another, I suppose, assertion, but it's an axiom that will ring true or not with you. You should never define yourself by what you stand against. You should always define yourself by what you stand for. You should get it clear in your mind what you believe in. And I want to say that belief, in this case, is, what are my principles? It's not believing in something that you hope to be true. Belief and faith are confused. Faith comes from the Latin word fidelis, or fido, which a lot of people name their dogs because their dogs are loyal creatures. Fido is I believe, and fidelis is the quality of faithfulness or fidelity. So if a hi-fi, right, that's high fidelity. What that was meant to mean was that it was faithful to the original. It was a recording that was faithful to the original rendition that was recorded at the time. It stuck true to what anybody would have heard at the time, the most true to it. So that's what high fidelity is. So fidelity is really what faith is. It's not believing in something that you don't know to be true. It's choosing what is your core principle or what are your core principles, and then sticking to them, especially when the going gets tough. So you have to think about what your principles are and decide them now before they're tested, because there won't be the opportunity to think about what they are in the sort of skirmishes, in the fog of war, in the heat of battle. And then just supposing if the war is won, and then you get to be in charge, it's no good then just deciding, well, what are my principles now? Because you might even forget to ask yourself, what are your principles? Because as we know, once people have power, power can corrupt them. And if they have absolute power, supposing if all the despots were gotten rid of and you were put in charge of the world, it would be very, very tempting then to be self-serving and just say, now it's my turn to subjugate everybody else. And now I'm going to take what's owing to me. I've seen it over and over and over again, and it's disappointed me so much that I have lost faith. And what I mean by that is hope, really, in humanity. I think a part of me that I'm trying to hold on to does know that there are still good people in the world. I am aware of this. Not perfectly good, imperfect people. They are corruptible, but they're still good. They still have good in them. And there are some people who, like myself, who are losing hope. And they think that there might never be any peace on earth here again. Any freedom, certainly. I'm speaking to you in the frame of mind of the Christian type of attitude towards people. That regardless of whether Santa Claus is real or not, and regardless of whether it was commercialized too much or not, that there was something about the magic of Christmas where we could set aside bygones, we could be kind to each other, we could greet each other. Everybody felt warmer and more well-disposed towards each other. We could smile at each other. And even though it was cold outside, there was a warmth in our hearts for each other. We smiled with our eyes. It was a genuine smile. And we really felt love in our hearts for everybody. And that's gone from my heart. Almost gone, you know. There's no real smile that I have anymore, you know, not for my, I'll say it, not for my father, not for my brothers, not for my, I mean, I'll give them one more chance, another chance, you know. But it's been the same for a long time. You don't need to know much about me, but I think people need to have some kind of a context to know that I'm not preaching at you to tell you that I'm perfect, you know. I won't be having any idyllic Christmas, and I haven't had an idyllic Christmas for a long time. I'm not even sure if I ever really did have one. But I do think back to times when I was a child, maybe I was 10 years old or less, and I remember looking at the Christmas tree and the colourful lights and the anticipation of Christmas, and sitting on the stairs, and the light would be out, but just everything would be illuminated by the different colours of the lights. Some would twinkle on and off, and I would feel the magic, and I would feel that maybe everybody at that same time in my country and all around the world, we were all good people, and, you know, in our own ways, we were all holding hands around the world. That's what I felt. And now it feels like hell on earth. It feels like it was, I suppose, it only took a few decades, but I again, looking back, I mean, things were simpler and easier, but I wasn't aware of a lot of the evil in the world, but I think things have gotten worse gradually, although it seems to be suddenly as well. But what I suppose I need to admit to you is that I don't believe in organised religion. I was born in a Christian country, and it was a Catholic country at the time, and it would have been more so Catholic than the USA. But, you know, we had a commercialised enough Christmas and that kind of thing. But I'm telling you that because I don't want you to think that I'm coming at you from a point of view of preaching to you about Christ on the cross. I don't want to get bogged down in what is Christianity, what is any of the flavours, or what are any of the flavours of Christianity, or that we have to believe in any particular way. I'm telling you that I don't like organised religions, but I do see the value in Christianity. I do think that it gives people ready-made rules to follow that are generally conducive towards having a good society. But I would much rather that people were good because it was the right thing to do, were kind to each other because it was the right thing to do, because they wanted to, not because they were afraid that they'd get punished if they weren't, or they wouldn't receive the rewards they hoped for if they didn't, you know? To me, Christianity, in that sense, is just a tool. like all religions really, to control people's behaviours. It's a control mechanism of society in the same way as the government is. But they think they can do without it, and that's why they've all coalesced now, you know? They think they've got, you know, an even greater, more rigid prison to keep everybody in. There was far more leeway, at least in the past, you know? And that era is ending. I don't want to go back necessarily to the time before, let's say, 2 years ago, or even 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. I always thought that we could have better. You know, I thought when the shackles of organized religion was removed from people in the West, I thought that people would be good because they wanted to, not because they were coerced or threatened or cajoled into being good to each other. You know, I wanted people to be considerate of each other just because. It always shocked me that, you know, Jesus had to say to people, just do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. As though, you know, it was all just too confusing for people. To me, if somebody can't figure that out for themselves, then I guess I set standards too high, but I just don't think that those kind of people are the kind of people you want in a society who have to be told, oh, right. So do you mean if I hit somebody in the head, that means that if I wouldn't like them to do it to me, I shouldn't do that? Oh, I think I'm getting the hang of this Christianity thing now, you know? If people, I consider it just to be implausible that anybody really could be that silly that they couldn't have figured that out for themselves, you know? And this is why I suppose I feel like often saying, like, you know, don't forgive them, Father, because they do know what they're doing, you know? I kind of feel like Jesus died for people's sins and they didn't deserve it, you know? And if we look at the way society is now, what difference really, you know, are they than those people who just sort of bayed and cheered and, you know, washed their hands of it and just said like, yeah, well, not my problem, you know? So, okay, getting a bit back to what I wanted to say now, and I'll try and finish on this. A little while ago, maybe 2 years ago, in a game, right? I don't know I can't remember what game it was called, but let's say it was probably Sim City, and there was a mayor of that city, and it was very realistic to life, you know? So in that city, anyway, this fellow was telling me that he had some characters in the game, and they went to I don't know what it was called, but it might have been like, say, the town hall in this Sim City to protest against the mayor in that city, because the mayor was doing a very, very, very bad job, and there was fires everywhere, and there was crime, and there was murders, and all these natural disasters even. And so they said, we can do a better job than the mayor, and the mayor is just enriching herself or himself and actively encouraging this kind of thing, and giving herself accolades or himself accolades, you know. And so they decided to get a group of these protesters and go there, and they were going to say, Mayor, we are telling you that you're not fit for purpose and that we're going to do a better job than you are. And I asked this fellow, I said, well, what are you going to do differently? Like, I mean, what exactly are your principles? What do you believe in? Because he said, well, I mean, look, I don't believe in what that person is doing. They shouldn't be doing this and they shouldn't be doing that. And I said, okay, well, what will you do instead? And he said, well, we'll figure that out after we take control, after we have power, then we'll figure out what we stand for. Now, I hope you understand how that is such folly, right? Such a foolish thing to say and to think and to do. I think he did understand how dangerous a thing that was to have said. And that was the last time I spoke to him. And I think he just didn't want to admit then that he was wrong. Or that, you know, he had been, not that he was wrong, I'll take that back. I'll say that he had been foolish to say that, or to not think that he needed to be very clear in his mind what he believed in. What are the principles that he believes in? What will he be holding near and dear to his heart if his plans should succeed, and if he should ever be in control of a town or a city or a state or a country? What would you do? It's too late to figure it out after you've been given the ring of power, because the ring of power then will take control of you, and you'll say, why should I do anything for all these people? They don't deserve it. Because you see, that's right. People don't deserve to have a good leader, because the people themselves aren't any good. So people themselves have to set an example. So this is my Christmas message to people who both would want to be in control and people who can't be in control, and people who must suffer under the control of tyrants. You must do two things, right? I'll just repeat what I said earlier there. You have to decide what you stand for. Decide what your principles are. What do you believe in? I mean, at minimum, it should be do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. But do you really believe that? There's no point in saying that unless you really believe that. Because if you don't believe that, then you'll say, no, I'll just do whatever I can get away with. And I'll take my revenge on people. And I'll even just be vindictive towards people because, well, they'd probably just be vindictive towards me. That's like, I've seen that so many times, people being preemptively vindictive and spiteful towards people because they assume that they would be spiteful towards them if they had the chance, if they had the power. And they might be right. But this is why actually you need a selfless leader. You need somebody who actually doesn't really like the people who he's ruling over, but he's bound by duty to principles. Do you see? The other thing then that people on the ground have to do is to be kind to each other, because with all this background aggravation, persecution, criminality going on, why would these people ever change their ways if they see their citizenry, right? Let's say the population at each other's throats all the time, right? You know, like the Bible says, father against son, daughter against mother. Now, I don't think it goes on to say things like, you know, brother against brother and husband against wife and daughter against daughter, but it's every which way, you know? Husband and wives bickering, children bickering, neighbours bickering, you know, people forming little groups and then arguing over all the little things, finding, like, and there's an infinite amount of things to split it into, a fractal landscape of finding lots and lots of different things to argue about and fight over. And say, I did this and I'm entitled to that and I knew this first and I thought of this, so that's my idea, so I deserve this. And, you know, maybe it's appropriate to invoke Clint Eastwood at this stage, although it's kind of out of context, and saying, like, deserving's got nothing to do with it. It's what's right and what isn't right. And everybody should be getting it very clear in their minds now, what is right and what is wrong. Not just because we've been shown good examples about what evil is and what wrong is, what malfeasance is from these people who are in charge at every level of our societies now. You know, I mean, if we really are any better than any of them, well, you have to lead by example. And you have to show kindness to everybody who is in your life. Kindness and consideration. Otherwise, what would be the point in deposing any of these evil despots if you haven't made yourself distinct from them, if you haven't shown by your words and your actions towards other people how you are different? Each one of us has to do the inner journey to say to ourselves, what are my principles? Do I want to have any principles? Am I the kind of person who would do the right thing even if it doesn't benefit me? Even if it actually causes me pain, anguish, suffering, hardship, would I still do the right thing? No matter what my position, if I was the lowliest of the low or the highest of the high. And that's what kings used to always sort of take oaths to do, you know, to treat everybody the same, no matter what their position in life is. That's what Jesus was all about, wasn't he? Treat everybody the same based on the contents of their heart, of their soul, right? Not their station or their position in life. I was sort of laughing there because I was thinking about, you know, again, what, you know, I want the three-lettered acronym guy, you know, who the holiday was created for him recently, but that was only to cause division. He said things that were good, but of course, people don't want to abide by the things that are actually, you know, onerous to abide by. Only just what, again, I'm thinking of another president, right? Well, no, not another president, but another famous figure with another 3-letter acronym. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Because people are still always sort of saying, what's in it for me, rather than what can I do for others, And isn't that a Christmas message that you won't be hearing much, because all the churches have shut up shop now, and they've shown their true colours. Apart from, I know there was a particularly well-principled man in Canada there, and I don't know what's happened to him lately. I haven't heard about it, but I must look into it. And if anybody knows, let me know. I think he was from Eastern Europe somewhere, and he was arrested. He was hassled by the Canadian police and then arrested just for keeping his church open, because the government doesn't want any competition now. They don't want any, holdouts. They don't want anybody not getting on board the sort of global corporate and government and church takeover, because they're all assimilating now. And they don't want any independent people left. They just want everybody to be singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. Right, I'll wrap this up and I'll reiterate this and I'll say again, get it clear in your minds on the off chance that any one of us who are being subjugated right now gets to be in charge and build a world after this, right? Build a heaven on earth. It's not going to happen unless you get it clear in your mind now what your duty is. And your duty is to the truth and to doing what is right. Not what just is convenient to you or feels good or, might help you feel that you've been vindicated. It's not about what you feel or want. It's about what you have to do, your sense of duty. And that's been sorely lacking in anybody for a long, long time, I don't think, in my travels throughout the world, I don't think I've met many people who can even understand that concept. So if there's anybody out there who feels that they want to fight the good fight, they need to ask themselves, what are their principles? Not what have I been told or what have been read or what have I discovered. Everybody can write a book and make a video and say a thing and whatever. And then somebody else can point to that and say, oh, it's written here or it's said there, or I looked this up and this is this. And no, ask yourself, do the journey to the interior. Ask yourself, what do I really believe in? What am I willing to say that I believe in, state that I believe in, on pain of death? Right? Because if you're willing to die for it, then you'd be willing to say, okay, if I'm in charge now, I'd be willing to put aside my petty needs and wants and grudges and everything else, and all the things that didn't work out for me in my life and I feel aggrieved by and I feel resentful about and I want to get my own back. And none of that now, because the difference between a child and an adult should be that you put away all those childish things and you say, okay, what do I need to do now? Not because I'm looking for reward or looking to avoid punishment or looking to exact my revenge or looking to redress any wrongs that were done to me in the past. No, put away all that. And my Christmas message to you is, to you men and women out there, are you willing to make the sacrifice for the children? The ones who are being told to wear this and go here and step on that and all this sort of stuff, right? Their childhood is being robbed from them and has been robbed from them for the last 2 years, but I would say more than that. So we need to make a sacrifice. Right? I don't know if any generation has fully sacrificed themselves so that this terrible thing can be stopped from propagating down through the generations, this terrible trauma, where we revisit the sins of our fathers on the children, and then each generation passes it on. So my Christmas message is, are you willing to do your duty and serve nothing but the truth? Your duty is, and your obligation is, to be faithful to the truth. Your duty is to live by it, stick by it, and carry it out. And if I don't talk to you before Christmas, I wish everybody a happy Christmas. And I will speak to you next time.